Carl Jung, the godfather of modern psychology, straight up said, "Life really begins at 40. Up until then, you are just doing research." Now we will walk through Jung's life decade by decade to see if he truly practiced the wisdom that he preached. So how did Jung navigate his way toward 40s? The great psychological rebirth. Let's see. At 19, he started studying medicine and eventually psychology. He kept noticing something odd. Science wanted to pretend the mind was just a brain in a meat suit. But Jung felt the psyche was more like an infinite labyrinth with secret doors and whispering figures waiting in the dark. Jung's 20s saw him become the golden boy of psychology. He was Freud's favorite intellectual son. Freud believed everything was about repressed sex. Jung nodded along, but secretly thought there was something much weirder going on. He wanted to talk about symbols, myths, and the ancient forces moving through the human soul. By his late 20s, Jung was gaining fame, but also, he was starting to hear the eerie rustling of his own subconscious. The psychological break, aka the necessary madness. Right before 40, things got, let's say, intense. Jung had broken up with Freud, messy divorce, lots of theoretical custody battles. He started diving into his own mind with terrifying dedication. This is when he had the infamous visions, where mythological figures would literally show up and talk to him. A red-horned entity called Philemon became his personal wise old man. He was sketching mandalas, talking to spirits, and basically doing a one-man shamanic initiation while still seeing patients. Most people, when they have a midlife crisis, buy a car. Jung? He wrote the Red Book, a glowing handwritten document filled with his hallucinations, prophecies, and encounters with the unconscious. This was him cracking open his own psyche, realizing that the rational ego is just a little candle in the middle of a vast, dark forest. 40 plus, the master of the shadow. By the time Jung hit 40, he had gone through his personal underworld. He emerged not as a rigid professor or a broken man, but as someone who had wrestled the shadow and learned how to live with it. He stopped pretending that humans are just thinking beings and embraced the chaotic, mythic reality of the psyche. For Jung, the 40s weren't about decline. They were about becoming real. He had built a persona, achieved success, but it wasn't until he faced his own terrifying depths that he actually became himself. Well, it looks like when he said, "Life really begins at 40. Up until then, you are just doing research," he meant it. Jung saw 40 as the moment when the mask, persona, starts to crack, revealing the weird, untamed creatures of the unconscious lurking underneath. Your 40s are when the shadow, the buried, repressed, slightly feral parts of your soul, starts clawing at the floorboards. Jung didn't see this as a breakdown. He saw it as the beginning of actual integration. Up until now, you've been renting space in your own psyche. Your 40s are when you move in. This is like a spiritual GPS rerouting time, and at this point, life throws you a cosmic curveball. The dream career might feel empty. Your old ambitions suddenly taste like cardboard. Jung would tell you, this is fantastic news, because now, for the first time, you might actually meet yourself. This is where spiritual rebirth kicks in. It's not soft or glowing. It's wild, a psychological forest fire that burns away the illusions. You stop trying to be the best version of yourself and start being the real version, which, ironically, turns out to be way better. Jung saw life after 40 as alchemy. You melt down the old self, and from the bubbling mess, something new, something raw, something real emerges. If life were a great cosmic symphony, 40 is the crescendo, the golden center, the axis upon which time turns. In Jungian terms, this is the individuation process reaching its richest, ripest stage. The past no longer haunts you. The future no longer owns you. You are here. If youth was about becoming, midlife is about being. It's the center of the mandala, the still point in the wheel of your own existence. And from here, everything makes sense. You sense a second birth approaching, but this time there's no mother, only the great unraveling. Jung by this point had pulled back the curtain on his own psyche and found not a clean, ordered self, but a pantheon of voices. The sage, the shadow, the serpent, the alchemist. He wrote to the dead, and they answered. He traced symbols older than language and found himself inside them. At 40, the game of becoming ends. The game of remembering begins. The body is both temple and tomb. The past is both memory and premonition. The self is both the dreamer and the dream. The Buddha often described wisdom as something that requires time to mature. Before 40, life is like unripe fruit, tart, reactive, needing external validation. After 40, the fruit has softened, sweetened. It no longer resists the tree, but simply falls when the time is right. This is why so many monks and enlightened beings solidified their insight around 40. It is the moment when knowledge turns into direct experience. It is when the Dharma is no longer studied, but lived. In Hinduism, the first 25 years of life are called brahmacharya, the stage of study and self-discipline. The next 25, grihastha, are about building career and family. By 40, one is supposed to transition into vanaprastha, the stage of withdrawal, where the external world loses its grip, and the internal world becomes the primary arena of existence. But this is no passive retreat. It is the great disillusionment, the unmasking of the play, the moment when you stop mistaking the shadow puppets for the source of light. It is why so many spiritual traditions, from the renunciants of India to the Zen monks of Japan, mark midlife as the natural moment of awakening. You see, in spiritual circles, 40 is the golden age of recalibration, the moment when you shed the skin of who you were supposed to be and finally embrace the truth of who you are. The usual societal narrative tells us that the peak of your career, your body, your beauty, your energy, all that jazz happens in your 20s and 30s. But as you hit 40, you realize those are just stage 1 items. It's stage 2 that brings the true reckoning, the wisdom of becoming you. Not the you that has been molded by external expectations, but the you that has been quietly waiting under the surface, like a hidden continent. The realization dawns that time is not something you have, it is something you are. That waiting for a future version of yourself is a fool's errand because that person does not exist. The present is not leading anywhere. It is the destination itself. This realization is both exhilarating and terrifying. It is what sends some people into crisis and others into the depths of wisdom. But for those who embrace it, 40 becomes the age of alchemy, the point at which existence stops being a ladder and becomes a spiral, looping deeper and deeper into the center of what has always been. For the spiritual seeker, 40 is the perfect time for awakening, because you have the mental fortitude to handle the complexities of spiritual knowledge and the emotional maturity to withstand the shattering that often comes with true understanding. At 40, your ego is tired, but your spirit? Absolutely not. It is fully ready to pass on secrets, but only to those who are ready to listen. Here's something to sink your teeth into. Individuation is not a simple act of self-reflection. It's an alchemical transformation of the self. The goal isn't simply to understand who we are, but to transmute the base, unrefined parts of ourselves into something greater. It's like forging a sword from raw iron. There is a process of refinement and transformation. When you were born, the universe sent you a memo, marked highly classified, and now you have the keys to decode your own personal mythos. At 40, you begin to understand the vastness of time, but not like a ticking clock. It's more like the slow, rhythmic beat of a drum echoing through the halls of history, through Africa and through the Amazon. through the tundra, and through the world's forgotten corners. At 40, the drumbeat aligns with your own, as though the universe finally recognizes you and gives you permission to not just listen, but to play along.